My high school teacher said I'd never succeed, so I hired her daughter as my assistant. My hands were sweating. Okay, not because I was nervous, but because the air conditioning in the penthouse suite of Nexus Innovations always ran a little too cold. Today was the final round of interviews for my new executive assistant. A crucial hire. What made this day uniquely interesting was the last applicant on the schedule. Her name was Sarah Albright, and her mother, Ms. Bethany Albright, was my high school English teacher. Warning you, my head of HR, a nonsense woman named Brenda, had said, scanning the resume. This one's brought her mom. Says it's for moral support. Bit unusual for a corporate setting. I just nodded, a slow smile spreading. Unusual. No, Brenda. This was destiny. What Brenda didn't know was that Ms. Albright was the reason I pushed as hard as I did. Back in 10th grade, she'd stood in front of the class, red pen poised, over my barely legible essay on future aspirations. I'd written about building my own tech empire from scratch. She'd scoffed. "Ethan Reed," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You lack focus, discipline, and frankly, the intellectual capacity for such grand delusions. You'll be lucky to flip burgers." Her words had been a hammer blow, but also a forge. They'd fueled every late night, every failed prototype, every impossible pivot. She saw a kid who doodled circuits in his notebook, not someone who'd one day be a CEO. Game On. Nexus Innovations hit them like a sleek, minimalist temple to innovation. Glass walls, futuristic furniture, and the hushed hum of servers. Sarah, bright-eyed and clearly nervous, walked in. Behind her, like a shadow, was Ms. Albright. Older, a little grayer, but still with that same rigid posture and knowing smirk. "Mr. Reed," Sarah began, her voice a polite tremor. "Thank you for seeing me. This is my mother, Bethany Albright." "Ms. Albright," I said, extending a hand, my gaze locking with hers. She didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. "It's a pleasure to meet you both." That's when I caught it. The second I released her hand, I heard Ms. Albright whisper to Sarah, just loud enough for me to catch, "He looks familiar, but definitely not the type to be running a place like this. It's probably just a manager." For the next hour, I put Sarah through her paces, and Ms. Albright subjected me to a silent audit. English to my face, but her eyes, her subtle head shakes. Her quiet murmurs to Sarah about the casual decor or lack of traditional structure were brutal. "Mr. Reed," Ms. Albright interjected politely, her tone saccharine. "Sarah tells me your company specializes in disruptive technology. Is that not a rather unstable foundation for a business?" "Mom," Sarah whispered, embarrassed. No, it's quite all right, Sarah," Miss Albright continued, her gaze sweeping over the open plan office. "I just hope you've considered the long-term viability of a career in such experimental fields. One truly needs a solid traditional foundation to succeed. Don't you agree, Mr. Reed? He can barely string a coherent sentence together. No future?" Sarah enjoying the interview. Ms. Albright asked sweetly, then leaned in, muttering, "He probably thinks Synergy is a new brand of energy drink." I gritted my teeth, but stayed quiet. "Be polite, don't cause a scene. This person is so informal," Ms. Albright added, observing my open-necked shirt. "Doesn't even try to project authority. No gravitas. It's probably making fun of established business practices," she chimed in. Every comment was a small cut, but I kept my mouth shut. Sarah tried to subtly change the subject, looking increasingly uncomfortable as her mother's thinly veiled criticisms continued. Then Ms. Albright turned to Sarah, speaking as if I were invisible. "This is what happens when young people chase fleeting dreams. They end up working for companies run by people who lack true academic rigor." Sarah replied, "Mom, please," Miss Albright cut her off. "Sarah is truly being naive considering someone with such unconventional methods." How can there be real success without proper, disciplined education? My jaw clenched. She added, "She's wasting her potential on someone who clearly doesn't appreciate the value of a classical education. Someone who only ever looked at the clock in my class, waiting for the bell." My chest burned. I'd taken insults about my ambition, my intelligence, my work ethic. But calling Sarah naive, implying she was stupid for even considering working. For me, that crossed every line. Just then, my assistant Mark entered, looking flustered. "Mr. Reed, sir, the board meeting is running late. I need your final approval on the Q3 acquisition." He paused, looking at Ms. Albright and Sarah. "I apologize for the interruption." Ms. Albright's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the board meeting and acquisition. But she quickly recovered a dismissive sniff. "Acquisitions, indeed. Likely of a small local coffee shop." That's when I decided I was done being polite. I stood up, my chair gliding silently back. The hum of the office seemed to fade. I walked directly to Mark, my voice carrying clearly across the executive floor. "Mark," I said, my voice calm but firm, "let's handle this now. Please. Gather the remaining candidates for the executive assistant role in the main conference room. We're about to make a decision." Ms. Albright's eyes narrowed. "Remaining candidates? Are there others?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Indeed. And I think it's time for a little Q&A session with everyone present." Then I turned to Sarah. "Sarah, please bring your mother. I want her to witness this." The silence was deafening as we walked to the conference room. When we entered, about 10 other sharply dressed applicants sat around a long, gleaming table. My senior VPs were also there. All eyes turned to us, Mr. Davies whispered. "You? You knew." I looked Miss Albright straight in the eye. I've remembered every word, Miss Albright. Since I was 16, I heard how I lacked focus, discipline, and intellectual capacity. How I'd be lucky to flip burgers. How my aspirations were grand illusions. I switched to a perfect, almost chillingly calm tone. And what hurt most was hearing you tell your daughter she was naive for even considering a position with someone like me. Complete silence. "My name is Ethan Reed," I continued, my voice now carrying the weight of undisputed authority. I walked to the head of the table. "And to answer your question, Ms. Albright, about the stability of disruptive technology. Nexus Innovations just finalized its acquisition of Global Tech Solutions, a company approximately 10 times the size of this building and, incidentally, the largest software provider to the entire London school district you used to teach in." Ms. Albright's face went white. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth. "And now," I continued, turning to the assembled applicants, "we have the final decision for the executive assistant role." My gaze swept over them, finally landing on Sarah. "Sarah Albright, you are hired. Your resume, your qualifications, your potential, they all stood out." I paused, letting that sink in. Then I turned back to Ms. Albright, a cold, hard glint. "In my eyes, but I won't lie, a significant part of this decision, Ms. Albright, is the absolute undeniable pleasure I will derive from proving you wrong. Every single day." Sarah's grandmother stood up, tears streaming. "Ethan, please, I'm so sorry." I stayed quiet to show respect. I continued, looking directly at Ms. Albright. "Even when you talked about me like an impossibility, even when you questioned whether I could truly achieve anything." Sarah, tears in her own eyes, reached for my hand. "Ethan, ... tell them about your first ever server build in your garage." I looked around the table, then at Ms. Albright, who was staring like she'd never seen me before, her face a mask of shock and regret. "Maybe another time," I said softly to Sarah. I squeezed her hand. "Welcome to the team. You're going to do great." Ms. Albright tried to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, a broken figure amidst the gleaming success she had once dismissed. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Ms. Albright. Her voice was small, hesitant. Ethan. Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology. A profound one. Sarah is loving the work. She says you're an inspiring leader. Only if you promise to tell me about the time you accidentally gave a pop quiz on Shakespeare to the advanced calculus class. I said, a slight chuckle in my voice. I'm dying to hear about it. That weekend, Sarah introduced me to a new client as Ethan, my boss, who not only built this amazing company from nothing, but also taught my mom a thing or two about judging a book by its cover. If you loved seeing this story of comeback and unexpected success, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next.